don't win elections in this country because you educate people about issues and you play fair in a sandbox with your opponent. You win because you attack and
you crush them.
You conquer.
Crush like me.
I hope you'll be picking Dennis Moore for Congress. Thank you.
Kansas, the heart of the American Midwest. It's the Sunflower State, renowned for its down-to-earth lifestyle and stormy weather. This is Johnson County, an affluent suburb of Kansas City. It's the scene of one of the most competitive races in the 1998 congressional elections between Republican Representative Vince Snowbarger and the Democratic challenger, Dennis Moore.
How are y'all doing? I'm Dennis Moore, running for Congress. What's your name? Missouri. Okay.
To augment his local campaign team, Moore has employed 3 young professional campaigners from Washington, D.C.
There's a proven, tested, historical formula for winning elections. It's a strong candidate. Dennis is a strong candidate. It's good fundraising, and it's good polling, and it's a strong organization.
Moore is well known in Johnson County, where he was elected 3 times as district attorney. Now he's a high-profile defense lawyer. But the Kansas 3rd District is a 4-county district. Johnson County has by far the largest population, but is overwhelmingly Republican. Only one of the counties, Wyandotte, can be guaranteed to return a Democratic majority. The incumbent representative, Vince Snowbarger, is a conservative Republican, now completing his first term in the House.
I wanted to try to restore trust and faith in government, and I hope by doing what I said I was going to do, that will begin to help restore that faith and trust.
The polls have shown consistently, but surprisingly, that Moore is neck and neck with Snowbarger. Polls commissioned by the campaign don't just show the relative positions of the candidates. They provide the objective basis for the design and management of the whole campaign.
Baseline poll is a poll at the very beginning of the campaign cycle, which may be 6-9 months before they run, to find out how well known they are, what the major issues are on the people's minds, and then they'll do tracking polls.
We did a tracking poll early in October to reevaluate the race, which allowed us to adjust our TV message, and it allowed Mark to adjust what he did with Dennis and the Free Press, and allowed Larry to provide a new rationale to donors to continue to raise money. Then we tracked again later in the month.
They are in a position that they have no right to be. They're in a Republican district in a Republican year, and yet they're right there at that 50-50 break point.
If Moore wins, it'll be the first time a Democrat has represented this district for almost 40 years.
I think we will have won because we were able to put together the coalition of moderate Republicans and Democrats and independents, that people who believe on the issues as I do.
Whatever else it takes to win, the candidate himself is central to the process.
Personality of the candidate can be very important. Candidates can say one thing in a campaign just off the record, and it gets recorded, and it can destroy a candidacy. The character of a campaign is set by the character of the candidate.
Some people had talked to me about running for Congress, and at that time I was really very unsure about doing it. It'd be a major change in our lives if we win, obviously. It was a whole year plus out of our lives to just run the campaign. I have a good law practice, and I really don't need this, and frankly I've told people that if I win, my income goes down and my expenses go up, because I have to buy a place in Washington or get a place in Washington, and my income will be less than I have made in law practice. So I'm not doing this for the money. I was really concerned about just some of the ideas and the issues we've talked about in this campaign.
We need somebody in Congress who will listen to what the people of our community want and what they need. We need Dennis Moore to serve us as U.S. Congressman.
Dennis Moore is a quality candidate. In other words, he's run for a fairly high office before. He's got good visibility, attractive individual.
Moore is trimmed to skinny and has good hair and is well-spoken, always seems to have a tan. You know, he fits Central Casting's idea of what a congressman should look like.
Most money in a campaign, some estimates are about 70% of the money in a campaign is spent on television.
Finally, a real choice for Congress, Dennis Moore. As district attorney for 12 years, Dennis Moore's record was unsurpassed. With a 90% conviction rate for career criminals, Moore fought to protect our families and won. Now Dennis Moore wants to fight for our families in Congress, to save Social Security, enact tax cuts that help middle-class families, not just the rich, and make a real Patients' Bill of Rights the law. Dennis Moore, fighting for our priorities in Congress.
If they aren't very good on television, that hurts, because television is very important.
What we're talking about here is just common sense and fundamental fairness. Common sense and fundamental fairness. I'll close just by saying this. Again, I appreciate the endorsement here this morning. I know where Wyandotte County is. I've spent a lot of time over here. I'll continue to do that in the future, and you will have a friend in Congress. Thank you very much.
I think that the first thing you have to have really is a good candidate, unless you've got oodles of money. Moore didn't have that much money, but he could raise it.
Usually, incumbents have a considerable advantage over challengers in raising campaign funding. But in 1998, in the 3rd District of Kansas, and indeed nationally, challengers, especially Democrats, have taken the lead in the money chase.
Money is the fuel for a campaign. It's the mother's milk of a campaign. You need it. If you don't have it, you can't buy television, you can't buy radio, you can't buy telephone calls, you can't buy get-out-the-vote operations, and you lose if you don't have money.
This is the most expensive congressional race in Kansas history. Both Moore and Snowbarger will raise around $1 million. There are probably another $500,000 on each side coming in extra expenditures, soft money from the national parties or labor union money. So this is, by Kansas standards, a tremendously expensive race.
I'm with Dennis Moore for Congress.
The professional in charge of fundraising for the Moore campaign is Larry Jacob.
Most of my job is spent convincing somebody to invest money with only a 50-50 shot of winning, right? And the best I can promise them is that Dennis may return your phone call when he's a congressman, you know, and that's a tough sell to some people. I mean, it's not like I'm out there with a product that says, here you go. You know, that's kind of like the overall part of my job. I mean, the day-to-day stuff is setting up a database that can handle who are you calling today, has their money come in, how many times have we called them, and that's something that you do right off the bat. And then it's calling. Dennis is supposed to do 40 hours a week of calling to get the job done. Dennis averaged 10 to 12 hours a week of calling.
I absolutely hate asking people for money, and I'd rather ask strangers for money, I guess, than my friends, but I don't enjoy that at all.
My job is to track those calls, follow up with those people. If somebody tells me they're going to write me a $1,000 check, you know, and I don't see it for 3 weeks, I'm basically going to be at their door with a baseball bat to get it if I have to. We do it a little bit nicer nowadays because of those laws and such. But
the police are always getting involved.
That's why you're working for a defense attorney.
Exactly.
You have to ask lots of people for money unless you've got a tremendous amount of money from political action committees.
Political action committees in the United States must be created if you are a corporation or if a union gives money or an association gives money to a candidate. They can give a maximum of $5,000 in the general and $5,000 in the primary election.
Moore, I think, has gotten about a quarter of his money in that way, which is not insubstantial at all, but that still means that he has had to raise $750,000 from individual donors, one donor at a time.
Thank you very much.
People have given in a way they've never given. It's been so impressive to me to see people that can really only give maybe $20 or $30 come up with $250 for Dennis. And that's why, as a fundraiser, outside of all the other units, I think we have a great chance to win on Tuesday. We have some very dedicated folks out there.
The highlight of today's campaigning is a joint television appearance with Vince Snowbarger. It's the last chance Moore has before Election Day to benefit from free or earned media exposure, as opposed to the TV adverts paid for by the campaign itself or by its supporters.
Dennis has done very well in five previous public appearances with Snowbarger, and each time has, in our view, either won the debate or left the debate even, and under those circumstances, it's a win for us every time.
I'm anticipating, like Mark, your Mark, said he might be kind of feisty this morning, and I think I can handle him.
I mean, the guy's an incumbent he's the only incumbent in the whole state. This guy is vulnerable.
And one of the few in the nation who
yeah.
are vulnerable.
Yeah, and he's got to be feeling almost embarrassed at this point.
Well, this guy wants more than anything to desperately to hold on to his seat in Congress, and I think he'll do and say just about anything to do that. So we may see some desperation this morning. I don't know. I guess my hope was, and it became quickly obvious it wasn't going to happen. My hope was that we could have a campaign and talk about all of the issues that are important without going into detail, just Social Security and HMO and health delivery in this country, and taxes and a balanced budget and education and public safety, all of those issues. And I could tell people where I was, and Vince could tell people where he was.
An early sign that the campaign wouldn't be fought in that way came during the August primary election, in which Moore was chosen as the Democratic candidate. The Snowbarger campaign sent this leaflet to every registered Democratic voter, criticising Moore for working as defense counsel in some notorious cases.
Even yesterday, I saw a direct mail piece that came in that basically said Dennis Moore used to prosecute fraud for seniors. Now he commits fraud on seniors. And I mean, that's disturbing to see something like that. And it's a despicable tactic as far as I'm concerned.
Yeah.
Morning.
Good morning.
Congressman.
Good morning, Dennis.
Good morning, Vince.
Snowbarger historically has been quite conservative on social issues. Overall, just a very conservative voting record. And this means that a fair number of independents and moderate Republicans are uneasy about Vince Snowbarger. He does not really reflect their views on various social issues.
It's a nice conversation, and he's making points, we're making points.
Just talk the issues.
Because, as you know, this is what I've been trying to do in this campaign. This is what I promise I'll do. You know, but if he goes out and he starts saying, Dennis is just using the scare tactics. He's a typical liberal Democrat. He wants to raise taxes and all that bullshit.
We can't sit there and just take hit after hit after hit and not respond. And I tried and tried just to stay positive and focused, but at some point you got to go back and say, well, wait a minute, look what's happening here, and it's gotten kind of nasty, frankly.
It's like two boxers who are undefeated, finally meeting in the ring for the championship fight. I mean, they've beaten the crap out of everybody they've faced, and now finally they're beating the crap out of each other, and they're surprised that they're getting punched in the face.
Can you take the gloves off and be the prosecutor?
Yeah. You know, I mean, try not to jab him. I know you like this guy.
I wish Dennis would have been more aggressive from the beginning and taken him out earlier.
I don't want you to come off too weak, but also I don't want you to.
If he's not feisty, I can be nice.
Yeah, I mean, you don't want to kick him when he's down.
It's been called one of the top campaigns for the House of Representatives in the nation. It pits freshman Republican Vince Snowbarger.
In the year of the Clinton-Lewinsky scandal and the impending impeachment proceedings against the president, it was inevitable that that question should arise first.
Moore versus Snowbarger, next on 9 on Kansas City. Like it or not, this is going to be a referendum on the state of the president, and you folks, you gentlemen, are vying for a seat on the grand jury, in effect. I'd like to know how you feel about all the evidence that is out there now. Most of it is before the public. How you would vote if articles of impeachment are debated on the floor. Mr. Snowbarger, let's start with you.
Well, everyone should know in Kansas City by now that I called for his resignation the day after he made his statement in August. I felt like as a moral leader, he ought to be the moral compass for the free world, and here he was telling us that he had lied back in January and had misled the American people. I felt like that was enough to call for resignation.
Mr. Moore?
I was very disappointed with President Clinton on August 14 when he spoke to the country and basically admitted that he had not been forthright and he lied to the people. And it took even 2 or 3 weeks of public therapy for him to really get that out and say that he was sorry and that he had lied to the people.
Given that all the evidence is out there already, how would you vote?
All the evidence is out there, and I've said about Mr. Snowbarger and every member of Congress and every United States Senator, I think it's really very inappropriate for any member of Congress to say right now that he would vote for or against impeachment. The first thing, and the reason is, everybody's entitled to a fair hearing and a fair trial. The first thing I do in selecting a jury in Johnson County District Court is ask, have you formed an opinion? If they have, one way or the other, they're off the jury.
The Clinton-Lewinsky affair and the impeachment proceedings in the White House have had a variety of effects as time goes on. At the beginning, Democrats thought it would be devastating. As the race gets down to the last 4 days, Democrats think that the Republicans have overplayed their hand and pushed impeachment too much, and that it's backfiring and it will help turn out Democratic voters.
Do you believe that the voters in the 3rd District look at this race in national context, or is the old Tip O'Neill line still applicable? All politics is local.
This politics and this race, I think, is local. You raised a national issue with your last question, and I'm not sure what Mr. Moore's running into, but very frankly, I've not run into the question all that often. Your analysis about all politics is local is really playing more true here, I think, than the national issues.
I'd have to agree with that. I run into questions about that, and people do have strong opinions, but most of the questions, frankly, come from the news media more than real people.
All right. Let's get to a couple of issues.
Not that you're not real people.
I was disappointed in that.
After a recording break, discussion moved on to Social Security, the safety net system for the elderly and infirm.
Mr. Moore, you repeatedly on the campaign trail have accused the congressman here of declaring that he wants to phase Social Security out. And
I haven't accused him of anything. I've told him what he said.
All right.
Told him part of what I said.
Well, I want to get right to that.
All right.
What's your position on what he said?
On what he said?
Yes.
What he said at one point in about 3 sentences, he said twice, we should look at phasing out Social Security and moving to a different system. And he told the Lawrence Journal-World in November of last year he wanted to restructure Social Security from the ground up. I think my criticism of him really is this. If he says he's going to look at phasing out Social Security, and I didn't say immediately, I said over a period of time, I think is what he indicated, then he should specify exactly what he's going to and not leave that question up in the air, because I think that's what frightens people.
Congressman, you got a response to that?
Sure. If he'd read the 3 sentences that he was talking about, he'd know exactly what my plan is.
I think that the campaign has knowingly gone right to the edge on Social Security. I think that Dennis knows that Vince Snowbarger probably does not want to get rid of Social Security, but they've used his term phase out, and quite effectively, I think. That's a core Democratic strategy across the country. On safety, public safety, gun control, what we call concealed carry of handguns, certainly Dennis, as a DA, doesn't want more guns on the street and has pressed that particular button pretty hard.
I think that we can have some reasonable restrictions on carrying guns, requiring licensing, requiring training, requiring testing, requiring law enforcement officials to sign off.
I'm running out of time. Mr. Moore.
I think his position is certainly not in step with what most people in our district want. They don't want more guns on our streets. They don't want people carrying concealed weapons in shopping centers and restaurants and sporting events. They don't want more assault rifles on our streets. And he's voiced support for repealing the ban on AK-47s, all the assault rifles that we talk about. As a district attorney for 12 years, I've seen firsthand gun violence. I own a gun myself. I'm not saying about taking anybody's guns away. I'm saying we don't need more guns on the streets, and I think most people believe that way as well.
This is, in effect, a state issue. Why are you talking so much about it in the congressional campaign?
I'm not. I answer questions about it, but this is not an issue to me that I've been dealing with at the federal level.
It's just a matter of when and in what format.
You know, you really get the impression throughout the campaign that Dennis Moore is just searching madly for the one or two issues that he can gain traction with that's going to give him a victory on November 3rd. Dennis Moore has like 9 TV ads he's had up throughout this campaign. Then Snowbarger has had a third of that. He's only had 3 ads up. Moore keeps trying different things, you know, nuclear waste, Social Security, you know, crime, all these things he's trotting out.
I think, though, that in the end, Moore settled on guns and Social Security. You know, a week ago tomorrow, 8 days out from the election, they get the results of their last poll, and it shows them even. And Moore's first instinct was to talk about, like, we got to go after him on the guns. He really thinks that he's thought for a long time that Vince is scared about the gun issue, and they got that very aggressive ad on that issue.
Yeah, a powerful ad.
Angry at the world, looking for trouble, carrying a grudge, and carrying something else. Vince Snowbarger actually supports the legalization of military-style assault weapons and wrote a law that would allow almost anyone to carry concealed weapons in public places, even outside your children's school. That's why Vince Snowbarger took thousands in political contributions from the NRA. Vince Snowbarger has put your family in the line of fire, and that's a real crime.
And they're running that campaign ad just between 9 in the morning and 3 in the afternoon and directing it especially at women with children.
Moore is sitting around with his advisors, and they're talking about that ad, and the issue was whether to include the gunshot so it appears that the girl gets shot or not. And the focus group said, you know, use the gunshot. But there was a volunteer, but one that is pretty close to Moore, said, well, what about having this on during family time? Was it, because it's sort of a scary ad.
Right.
And, you know, is that appropriate for kids to have to put, and she raises this question, no one acknowledges the question, they just go on.
On the other hand, talking to the consultants, and maybe we could move toward them, they always thought they were going to run that ad. I mean, it was just a matter of when and in what format.
We would sit around and we'd have these meetings about our TV ads, and Dennis would say, Dennis and his friends would say, oh, you know, this is so harsh, this is so, you know, it's so brutal, it really doesn't seem like it's fair, it's just too mean-spirited. And we tried to tell him, look, you know what, I guarantee you, Vince Snowbarger is not sitting in his office watching television ads saying, we should tone this down, it's too hard on Dennis.
I think what's been interesting is to see how they fight over the wording of 1 or 2 words in an ad. And the media people back in Washington will be on the phone talking to Moore, talking to his campaign folks. And honestly, it's often the media people in D.C. allied with the professionals here working on Moore and his people to put a little more edge on the campaign, on the contrast, a little more edge on the perhaps the negativity of the ad.
There is no such thing as negative, because you can only compare and contrast.
It's important to distinguish between negative ads and contrast ads in American politics. Negative ads are distorting a person's record, lying about something. A contrast ad, on the other side, is an ad that points out the positions of both candidates. Sometimes they're hard-hitting, sometimes they're emotional, but it's legitimate because it's true. Contrast ads, I think, are good for campaigns. And in fact, we have research that shows that turnout goes up with contrast ads, and turnout in the vote goes down with negative ads.
You can't get away with the sort of stuff that candidates and campaigns used to get away with, frankly, now. The public won't stand for it. It has to be based in fact. I mean, you can't just go out and say, you know, don't vote for the other guy because he's not very nice at all. I mean, you have to base your characterization of your opponent on the facts. And to say that it's negative to point out votes that your opponent cast that you disagree with, I think does the whole process of running a campaign a disservice.
Vince Snowbarger has put your family in the line of fire, and that's a real crime.
That ad is about Vince Snowbarger's public record and that ad is entirely based in fact. And if it's negative, it's not our problem. That's the guy's record. We're exposing it for what it is.
After those guys are gone, I'm still going to be here living in this community, and I don't want to have a reputation as somebody who kind of shades the truth or bends the truth, and I'm trying to be accurate and truthful in this campaign.
When we're making these suggestions, it's not because we want Dennis to be perceived as a bad guy after this election. We know what it takes to get him to win, and if he wins, we also know that people aren't going to necessarily remember that he called Vince an extremist. People are just going to remember Dennis Moore congressman.
In many ways, the roles of the consultants have been to come into Kansas and essentially say, in a state that does not have a strong party, has not elected a Democrat in this district for almost 40 years. In essence, they're saying, look, we know how to elect people. You haven't had much luck here. Let us do it. Now, this isn't always easy for Moore, for his own advisors, and there's always tension between the people who know the territory, Kansas, and the people who theoretically know how to win a campaign.
They're not from this area. They don't know Kansas, and they don't know Johnson County in this district. And so what I've tried to do is use their expertise where I can, and also depend upon my older, more mature friends who know this area a lot better than they do.
The phrase that all three of us have heard non-stop since we've been here is, you're not from around here, you don't know how it is here. I've been in 8 states since I graduated college, and I've heard the same thing everywhere I went, and you know what, it's been exactly the same. You have people that produce and people that don't produce. You have, you know, candidates that melt down and candidates that melt down more. I mean, it's the same basically everywhere you go. And you know, when people tell me, well, you're not going to be able to do this, or you're not going to be able to do that, nobody around here has money, all that kind of stuff. I mean, I know the donors of the 3rd District better than probably anybody in this district does, because nobody is paid to sit there 18 hours a day and study this stuff, and I've done it for 13 months. Chris knows the voters here better than I don't care how long people have lived here, because nobody in this district has sat down and studied the voting patterns of folks as much as Chris has. And that's what they don't get. They think, we're not from here, we don't get it. We do get it, but we get it from a more objective point of view. And we're able to then take that kind of data and apply it to what we need to do to win. And that's, I think, the fundamental tension between staff and candidates and people surrounding the candidate.
They're running a campaign that they could run in Maine or Santa Barbara or Texas. They've had tough commercials, they've done their focus groups, they've gone through the process of survey research to figure out where the votes are. And again, coming to the last few days of the campaign, they're dead even in a very difficult district. And I think everyone has to be pleased with the results.
In this district, they've never elected a Democrat in the last 40 years. And the local view is, because we haven't had the right candidate talking about the right ideas, that's a very naive view. I mean, the reality is, you haven't had a good candidate that's run an aggressive campaign, that's had money for television, and has had a strong message to compete against an incumbent, period.
Well, good. I've had 4 different elected Republican officials say they're supporting me. So thank you so much for your help.
It's Halloween. Dennis Moore and his wife Stephanie visit the Lawrence Farmers Market in Douglas County. A period of warm, dry weather has ended with torrential rain, just as the battle to get out the vote gathers momentum.
Not only is it a war that you see on television of commercials, but that's the air war. But the ground war is really in the trenches of getting people to the polls.
Turnout is very important in any election, but especially in midterm elections, because it is so low. The average turnout from 1932 to 1998 is 38%. The turnout in 1998 is estimated to be a little below 38%. that means that just hardcore supporters of candidates in the Republican and Democratic Party are likely to turn out. And so therefore, a race can go one way or the other with 1,000 votes, with 5,000 votes of those in the middle, those who are undecided, that get out to vote and swing one way or the other almost at the last minute.
Rainy day for campaign and selling flowers, I guess.
Yeah, it's a crummy day. You going to the game today?
Yeah.
Oh, yeah.
Well, good to see y'all.
Thank you.
Look at me for a vote if you will.
The conventional wisdom is that the rain and cooler temperatures will depress turnout. That's more likely to hurt the Democrat than the Republican. The Republican has a stronger base in this district, and many of his voters are social conservatives, the Christian coalition types, who will go out to the polls come hell or high water, as the case may be. But Democrats are probably doing better at getting their votes out in this election than they have for a long time in Kansas.
Good morning, how are you? I'm fine. Hi, I'm Chris Steineger, and I'm with the Dennis Moore for Congress campaign.
Low turnout elections favor organized groups. If the low turnout with fewer voters going to the polls, a smaller but well-organized bloc, if it gets all its people out, can win. And here in Kansas in the 90s, as well as the rest of the part of the country, that has been happening.
I'm fine.
Social conservatives in our state are roughly 25 to 27% of the electorate. Kind of depends on the issue, but by and large about 25, 27%. And they've won a number of legislative races. They've done well in some statewide type elections. We think they'll get their votes out on Tuesday as well. However, we've worked really hard to get our group of voters well mobilized. And we think with our phone calling, we're calling them 3 times each and knocking on their doors, handing them literature personally, we think our vote will also be well mobilized. So we think we'll be about even with those two groups, the Democrats versus social conservatives. Then the middle ground moderate Republicans seem to be breaking the way of Dennis, 2/3 for Dennis, 1/3 for Snowbarger. And if that holds, then we'll win the election.
Douglas County, home to 2 universities, is relatively liberal but not necessarily democratic.
Education's a big
Moore visits the local Democratic campaign headquarters to encourage the volunteers. But how important is the local Democratic Party to his campaign?
The key element for the Democratic Party in this district is that Dennis Moore will have the label Democrat next to his name on the ballot. Beyond that, the Democratic Party in the district is pretty minimal. The Democratic Party in Kansas is not very strong generally. In the United States and in this district, most candidates build their own organizations. And so there is some overlap with the Democratic Party, but in many ways you've got to get those volunteers to work for your campaign. Most of that enthusiasm comes because Dennis Moore is an attractive candidate, he's raised a lot of money, and has a real chance to win.
Loyalty to the campaign can even transcend party affiliation.
I felt that the Republican Party, which I am actually a registered member of, has really started not to represent or reflect the beliefs that I think a lot of Republicans hold, that they've become more extreme, more far right, more tied to religious ideology rather than really focusing on the issues, taxes and education, things that are really important. Most of my friends who are Republican are going to vote for Dennis Moore.
Lenore, this is Dennis Moore calling. I'm running for Congress. Well, thank you so much.
In Kansas, as in many other states, it's possible to cast your vote in advance, well before Election Day.
Talk to your friends. Thank you so much. Bye-bye.
Hi, is this Hattie?
She's Republican. She already voted for me. I think we have an excellent shot to win this race. The last poll we did, we were dead even, and I heard just last week from a friend of mine who's a Republican elected official, been a friend for 20 years. He told me he had heard about a state Republican poll that showed us up 4 points. Now, I think we're someplace between dead even and up 4 points. And if we can get our people out to vote on Tuesday, I think Vince Snowbarger may be history, may be practicing law or trying to practice law in Olathe again.
November the 3rd, Election Day. The rain has stopped.
Lou, give me your red ticket.
Throughout the USA, the speculation continues about the effect of the impeachment issue on Democratic turnout. For Dennis Moore, it could make all the difference. Altogether, the Moore campaign has spent $982,000. A massive 2/3 of that was spent on buying time for TV and radio adverts. About 3.5% was spent on getting out the vote.
You have? Okay, well, thank you so much for your support. And bye-bye.
Just a few minutes after the poll closes at 7 p.m., the results from all over the country start to appear.
But nothing Adam Wyandotte
Chris
yet.
Steiniger keeps up to date with progress at the 4 county electoral offices. He'll relay the results to Dennis Moore, who's staying away from the putative victory party until later.
For what it's worth, I've got a hotline into each one of these offices. So I'm just calling right on in. So I get the results before the public gets them.
Without much science, a little feel, I think that there's a good chance that Dennis is going to win by around 5,000 votes. That's probably more optimistic than you'll hear from anyone else. Right now it looks like you'd be just about...
Right now it's a draw in advance ballots.
Yeah.
Well, we're up 1137 to 980.
Dennis will win this race tonight by less than 1,000 votes.
And you got 37,815 versus 43,744. Yep. It means we're winning, Dennis.
A little bit of Democratic turn, and I don't think the Conservatives have really fought this race. Plus a very good campaign.
ABC is showing with 60% of the vote counted, shows you at 53%, Snowbarger at 47. Well, yeah, I'm sorry, but you know, don't get too excited, but it's looking good.
Well, we pulled out more in Wyandotte. All precincts reporting, not including advanced. 20,196 versus 7,980.
All right. Wyandotte.
I need you here. You can't get here right at 9. I need you here before 9 o'clock.
Well, here's our total so far in the race. We're up about 5,000 votes.
You feel good?
Yeah.
Too close to call. Yeah. When you're confident, you can claim victory.
Okay.
You will.
At 9 o'clock, it looks as though the Democratic majority in Wyandotte County will outweigh the Republican majority in Johnson. Not all the votes are in yet, and it's too soon to declare victory, but Moore tells the media he's feeling confident.
It looks good. We're up about 8,000 votes. Well, I'm not ready yet to declare victory.
The questions people want to have answered in terms of median, I think, people in the voting population is, how'd you do this?
Yeah.
So I think you want to talk about putting together.
I don't know that we need to talk too much about that on the top of the news. I want to talk some general themes first, and then we can talk individually about.
But I think part of your general theme is bringing people together.
Absolutely, yeah.
And, you know, and you want to obviously thank your opponent for running a tough race and all that sort of.
Glad you reminded me of that, because I forgot all about that. Thank you, my opponent.
We ought to go out there at ought to leave this room at about 9:56 or 9:57, because we want the crowd at a fevered pitch when you get up on stage.
What do you mean?
They're going to go nuts. They are going to go absolutely bonkers nuts. God damn, I wish we had some yard signs.
At 9:45, a TV report gives Moore the extra bit of confidence he needs. He'll declare victory live on the late evening news at 10 o'clock.
As a what, Republican or Democrat?
They said 2% of the precincts still unreported, and we were up 4% in the vote, so I think we're probably there now.
I think we're pretty safe.
Vince hasn't conceded yet, has he?
No.
But somebody just said that they saw on TV that he was going to do so fairly shortly.
Can I have my book here?
Mm-hmm.
Thanks.
We ought to record that one.
Larry?
Congratulations. Good job. Good job, Chris.
Good job, my friend.
Good job. Good job, Dennis.
Jeez. Mark, I need to give you a bear hug too, buddy.
Yeah, okay, let's make sure your speech goes okay first, and then you can.
Who would have thought this?
In the event, Democratic turnout was high, especially in Wyandotte County. Dennis Moore won by 10,000 votes, more than anybody expected, but still a margin of only 4%.
It's a pretty big deal. Granted, it's one congressional race in one election in the United States. Basically, this was a good campaign, run against an incumbent who did not run a particularly strong campaign. In that instance, you've got to give a lot of credit to Dennis. You've got to give a lot of credit to the people who ran that campaign.
This was big. It was big for Democrats that wanted a representative here in Kansas, and it was big for Democrats nationally who want another Democrat Congress, and it was big for me personally because I wanted to prove to people a Democrat could win in this district in a non-presidential year. It's very, very special.
It's overwhelming. The people that came out for this thing and worked, gave their time, gave their money more than I've ever seen on any political campaign ever. It's just phenomenal. It's just amazing to be a part of it right now. So I'm just going to hug a few people and go to sleep tonight. Sleep for the first time in about, I don't know, 9, 10 months.
I haven't stopped working yet, so I haven't taken any time to think about how it feels. I mean, we've been doing live interviews and radio interviews, and my page has been going off nonstop, so I guess I haven't taken the time yet. But when I do take that brief moment to think about the fact that we won, I guess I sort of get a little excited, tingly all over. It sure is better than losing, that's for sure.
When we started this 14 months ago, I hoped and I believed this was a possibility, but you just never know. And we worked hard, we put together a good campaign. I think we did all of the right things, and I think we were rewarded with a win tonight.
Washington, D.C., 1 month after the election. What lessons are to be learned from the way campaigns were run? At a conference organised by Jim Thurber, Dennis Moore's surprise victory attracts a lot of attention.
Good morning. Welcome to the latest conference on improving campaign conduct, titled Money, Media, and Madness Inside the 1998 Elections.
In the end, I think what made this, rather than a 1,000 vote race, a 10,000 vote race was the field operation.
Chris?
Thanks, Bert. Victory is even sweeter today. I mean, from my point of view, the victory was a validation of the campaign plan that Larry and Mark and the consultants and I advanced tirelessly at the local level with our candidate and his kitchen cabinet, and it worked on Election Day, and it worked in a big way.
The Kansas seat was important nationally. The Democrats gained 5 seats. This was one of the seats. An incumbent being beat in this year when everyone seems to be satisfied with the economy and they were supporting incumbents was exceedingly rare.
Ours was a campaign that had an internal struggle between the campaign team and the consultants versus the candidate, his kitchen cabinet, and his friends from 20 years ago who helped him run for DA in 1976. And I don't say that in a negative way. It was just 2 different schools of thought on what was the best way to win an election.
A lot of it had to do with the way this campaign was put together. It was a professional campaign where they did their polling, they had their field operation, they did their paid and free media, and they did an excellent job.
Our polling provided us methods to introduce Dennis and his core values to the electorate, and throughout this race, we used polling to not only make adjustments in our message and TV, which are traditional, but we used polling to tinker with our scheduling. We also used the polling to readjust our field priorities, which were tremendously successful on Election Day. Bottom line, we would have not won this race without following the advice set forth by our pollster.
Dennis Moore, he's not the warmest guy in the world. He's kind of got a temper and stuff, but he can play the guitar. And as soon as he starts playing the guitar, he softens up, and you get something different from Dennis Moore. And the campaign had the wit to bring this out of him.
Music lessons with Dennis Moore.
Country. My patient's Bill of Rights will make you kick up your heels. Rock. We need to make Social Security solid as a rock. Blues. That's what you'll feel with Vince Snowbarger's votes on education. And finally, picking. I hope you'll be picking Dennis Moore for Congress. Thank you.
The guitar ad, we have some pretty incredible data, which is that it was one of the, when we asked people an open-ended question in the post-election poll, what are the reasons that you voted for Dennis Moore? I think the first was, so we like his issues, and there were 2 or 3 other answers, but I think it's 10 or 11% said they liked the guitar ad, which is great. Anytime somebody, a poll shows that your ad comes out high, that's great. What's amazing is that the ad only ran about 350 points, which means the average viewer only saw it 3 times. So we really feel like it was an ad that really cut through the clutter.
For accuracy, the post-election poll was actually conducted on election day. We went in the field that night and asked people who you voted for, and then probed why.
I remember opening it and feeling like I was transported to election day, and it really was a chance to see exactly where people were on election day, and that was really interesting. It showed that our message really got through. It showed that for my interest as a media consultant, our media really connected with people, that we had the right mix of issues and personality. It showed some really important things about the stuff that other people did in the campaign. The free media really was a reason that people voted for Dennis Moore, and I think Mark Nevins could take a lot of good feeling about that. The field program that people said, I met Dennis, or I met some volunteers, and that was another reason that I voted for Dennis.
We were in a district that hadn't elected a Democrat in 40 years. No one had ever done field in Kansas. I mean, field was like corn. I mean, field wasn't get people to the polls. And I don't say that in a disrespectful way to the Sunflower State. One of the things that I talked to Dennis privately about after the last track was, this race is so close that it was possible for Dennis to literally shake enough hands to provide the margin of victory. And in the post-election poll, I mean, we saw that in Wyandotte County, people listed personal contact with Dennis Moore as one of the reasons for voting for Dennis Moore.
Thank you. All right. How are you, sir? I have won, and I've lost, and it feels a lot better to win. The
question is now, can he do it again? He's still in a Republican district, and they're going to come at him harder than hell right away. He's got to start, Larry Jacob will tell you, he's got to start raising money right away. But it's it's always that first re-election for a freshman that makes the difference.
This is music lessons too, okay? This land is your land.